Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Cowboy Seal's Second Chance by Janalyn Knight, narrated by Hugo Locke and Elizabeth Russell. Chapter 1. Austin O'Brien, known as Reaper to his SEAL brothers, stopped outside the barbed wire bar, listening to the country music blaring from inside. Was he ready for this? Clouds had rolled in this evening, and there was a chance of rain overnight. No wonder his leg, injured from an up-close encounter with an IED, was aching like an SOB. Sighing, he followed the cowboy who had just opened the door. At least being with Slade and Tina would keep at bay the memories that struck when he was alone. He strolled to the bar and ordered a beer, then scanned around for his friends, finding them at a long table near the dance floor entrance. He headed that way as Slade, his best friend and a former SEAL, gave his wife Tina a tender kiss. A hollow formed in the pit of Reaper's stomach, and he gritted his teeth. Enough of this maudlin bullshit. As he approached, he noticed a glass at the end of the table where he always sat so that he could make an early getaway. Damn. Instead, he took a seat across from his friends. Slade reached for his hand. "Glad you made it, bro." Tina smiled at Reaper in welcome. The rowdy song the band had been playing ended. "Said I'd be here." Reaper shook with Slade. The last thing he'd wanted to do was be at the barbed wire tonight. However, he'd come because they were counting on him, and one thing he never did was let a friend down. A moment later, a gorgeous blonde arrived at the table accompanied by a tall, good-looking cowboy. He pulled her chair back for her, and she thanked him. Tina raised her voice over the noise of the next song. "Reaper, this is my good friend, Courtney Bird." When the blonde turned to look at him, Tina said, "Courtney, this is Austin O'Brien. Everybody calls him Reaper. He was in the SEALs with Slade and Flint." Courtney reached out her hand. "Good to meet you, Austin." For some reason, he liked it that this beautiful woman called him Austin. It squared with her wholesome girl-next-door aura. Her makeup was flawless, yet understated. If her blonde hair was out of a bottle, he sure couldn't tell. And those jeans. They fit her hourglass figure perfectly, but weren't so tight that they revealed too much. She was sexy as hell without shouting it to every man in the room. The pleasure is all mine. He shook her hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm. He instantly liked her for that. She took a long drink from her glass, nearly emptying it. When she put it down, she glanced at him with a grin. "Dancing's hot work, don't you think?" She was cute. "Let me get you another. What's your pleasure?" "Thank you. A screwdriver, please." On Saturdays, finding a waitress when you wanted one was never easy, so he left for the bar. His damn leg throbbed. He walked fence all day looking for stretched or broken strands, but he refused to limp. When he returned to the table, Tina and Courtney were carrying on an animated conversation. He set Courtney's glass in front of her and took a seat. She stopped mid-sentence and smiled. "Thanks, Austin. I appreciate it. I'll get you your next beer." He frowned. "No need for that." She gave his arm a gentle squeeze. "I insist." Goosebumps raced to his shoulder, and a longing for something he couldn't put a name to overwhelmed him. He looked down at his beer, turning it round and round, searching inside himself for an answer to this strangeness. Flint and Morgan arrived at the table, and the ex-SEAL gave Reaper a slap on the back. "Good to see you out and about, bro." Reaper nodded. "Thank Tina. I hear she would have hit me if I'd said no." Flint laughed and helped Morgan with her chair. She patted Reaper's arm. "How are you? I haven't seen you in over a week." He shrugged. "Fine. How's Violet?" His friends were respectful of his loss 5 years prior, and sometimes felt uncomfortable talking about their daughter around him, so he made an effort to ask about Violet often. Morgan rolled her eyes. "A handful." She leaned her head toward Reaper and asked, "Do you see my gray hairs?" "This light's bad," he grinned. Well, if I don't have any, I should. That little girl of mine gives me a run for my money." A slow song started, and the tall cowboy came back and asked Courtney to dance. As she stood to accept, a wave of irritation swept through Reaper. He squeezed his eyes shut. What the hell is going on with me? After taking the last swig of his beer, he headed to the bar. The woman could dance with whomever she wanted. Keeping his back to the dance floor, he drank where he stood until the song ended. As he took his seat at the table again, Courtney returned, the cowboy at her side. The guy reached for her hand. "Why don't you join me and my friends at our table?" Reaper's pulse picked up speed, and he pressed his lips into a hard line. Who was this jerk? Courtney answered with a smile. "Thanks for asking, Tony, but I'm with my friends tonight." Reaper let out a breath and took a drink of his beer. Tony pulled back Courtney's chair for her, then left. Reaper watched the cowboys retreat through narrowed eyes. When a good dancing song began a couple minutes later, he surprised himself by asking, "Courtney, would you like to dance?" "I'd love to." Her deep blue eyes sparkled. He kept his hand protectively at her back as he escorted her to the dance floor. He liked the fact that she was tall for a woman. She must be at least 5'8" or so. He disliked having to scrunch down to kiss. Crap, why was he thinking of kissing? He pulled her into his arms at the edge of the floor. When she looked into his eyes and smiled, his stomach gave a little flutter. What the hell was going on with him tonight? He'd barely met this woman, and yet he felt incredibly drawn to her. Tina had taught him the Texas two-step the last time Slade had dragged him out dancing at the barbed wire. Courtney followed his lead flawlessly. He relaxed and enjoyed the feel of her in his arms, ignoring the pain in his leg. She was worth every damn twinge. When the dance was over, he didn't want to let go of her hand. She didn't seem to mind, so he held on to her all the way back to the table. Before she sat down, she squeezed his fingers. "Thanks, Austin. I had fun." "No, thank you. You made me look good out there." Catching the waitress's eye, he brought around for the table. Courtney leaned toward him and said over the noise of the band, "Isn't this music great? I love this band." He nodded. "They're good. Easy to dance to. Do they come here often?" The sound grew louder, and she put her lips to his ear, sending a shiver through him. "I've been here several times when they played, so they're kind of regulars, I guess." A slow song began, and Tony headed toward their table. Reaper shot the cowboy a hard stare and said to Courtney, "May I have this dance?" The light from the dance floor shone on her blonde curls. "You may." Taking her soft hand in his again, he led her to the floor. As he held her in his arms, she laid her head on his chest. The sensation took him by storm. He suddenly wanted her more than he'd wanted a woman in a very long time, and he didn't understand it. What was it about her that called to him so? This feeling wasn't that raw, lustful passion that had come over him sometimes when he was on leave. It was something totally different. He wanted to hold her, protect her, love her. He kissed the top of her head, surprising himself. She drew back and met his gaze, searching his face. Then the corner of her mouth tilted up, and she laid her head against him again. He put his arm around her as they walked back to the table, and she leaned into him. His mind was spinning. He was unsure what was happening to him, but he didn't want it to stop. In spite of the nagging pain in his leg, he danced with Courtney throughout the evening. Each time he had to release her from his arms, it was like letting go of something precious. They held hands under the table, and he could tell that she needed the connection as much as he did. As the night wound down, he began to feel almost desperate. He leaned over and said in her ear, "I don't want this night to end." She met his gaze. Take me home, Austin. His heart pounded, and he pulled her to him. I'd love that. Then he paused. Do you care if everyone sees us leaving together? She shrugged. I can never keep anything from Tina anyway. Let's go. They said their goodbyes and walked out, his arm around her shoulders. God, he felt good. She followed him in her car through town and out to his cabin. When they got inside, she dropped her purse by the door and turned to him. I don't normally go home with men. I'm not sure why I'm doing this. She bit her lip and searched his eyes. I just know I want to, Austin. He drew her to him, letting her see how much he wanted her. Something good happened tonight. That's why we're here. She nodded. Are we having a drink? All I want is you. She chuckled softly. He led her down the hallway. Bathroom's there on the right. Got it. Leading her into a darkened room, he turned on a bedside lamp and pulled her into his arms. Thanks for coming over. She cupped his cheek, a crooked little smile on her face. Do you mind that I don't call you Reaper? He shrugged. Been a long time since anyone but my dad called me Austin, but it's okay. I just couldn't bring myself to call you the Grim Reaper, you know? He tilted his head, his eyes distant, and looked off over her shoulder. It's what I am, or was. With her palm, she turned his face back to her. To me, you're Austin, my Texas cowboy, and a great dancer. He grinned. I'm not much of a cowboy, but that's fine with me. She drew him down to her and kissed him softly, tracing his lips with the tip of her tongue. He moaned and held her tight, kissing her, sweeping her lips with his. She reached for his T-shirt and pulled it over his head while he unfastened her buttons and kicked off his boots. When they were naked, he laid her in the bed and settled beside her. As he looked down on her, she ran her hand across his chest. You're beautiful. He chuckled. I was going to say that. She slid her hand down to his leg. What happened here? An IED. That's also what gave me the scar on my head. He'd let his hair grow out some since he'd left the service, but the long scar was still visible. I wondered about that. He traced the hollow of her throat. What about you? Do you have any scars? I have a bad one on the bottom of my foot. I stepped on broken glass. I grew up on the coast. Poor baby. Let me see it. She laughed and raised her leg, and he grasped her foot. Wow, that must have hurt. He drew his finger along the scar, then gently kissed it. Her eyes were wide and dark when he met her gaze. She smiled. It feels better now. He chuckled and released her foot. Beside her again, he slid his leg over hers and kissed her. It was a soft, slow kiss, and she sighed when he finished. Trailing tiny kisses along her jaw, he whispered in her ear, I want you. She slipped her arms around him. Take me now, Austin. He smiled and kissed her again, slowly at first, then deepening the kiss, exploring her. His pulse raced, and he ran his hand along her rib cage, down to her small waist. She sucked in a breath, and he moved, sliding his finger between her folds, finding her sensitive spot. She gasped, and he worked his magic there for long moments, knowing what she desperately wanted. He took her nipple in his mouth and caressed it with his tongue. She whimpered. He didn't stop, sensing the intensity of her pleasure. He moved to the other breast and did the same. She tossed her head, arched her back, and suddenly called out, Austin! He loved the look of wild passion on her face and kissed her full lips. Grabbing the condom from the table where he'd tossed it, he slid it on, then entered her, letting her take his length slowly. She moaned and wrapped her legs around his waist. He smiled and withdrew, then entered her again more quickly, teasing her. She gasped, her body squeezing him, urging him on. She dragged her fingers through his hair, pressing into him, and called, "Hurry!" Her incredible body still spasming around him, he began his rhythm. Her pulsing urged him on. Thrusting deep one last time, unable to hold back, he gave in to his own need. All thought ceased. His muscles strained, his back arched. He closed his eyes, lost in the moment, in the amazing sensations washing through him. Her arms released him. Oh, God! Breathing harder than he'd expected, he lay down beside her. Taking a deep breath, he pulled her against his chest. "Thank you. That was great." He could hear the smile in her voice when she said, "Great? It was freaking awesome." He snuggled closer to her, an unfamiliar sense of well-being making him tired. He kissed her neck. "Good night." She laid her arm over his and clasped his hand. "Good night, Austin." Hours later, he startled, awake with a familiar nightmare, his heart pounding. He squeezed his eyes shut and clenched his teeth, forcing the images of his kills from his mind. Courtney stirred, and he drew her closer to him, thankful for her warm body snuggled against him. He was here, in Texas, with a sweet, gorgeous woman in his arms. The sandpit was in the past, forever. He caressed her soft skin, careful not to wake her, grounding himself in the present, and eventually returning to sleep. As dawn peeked through the bedroom window, he felt Courtney wake. With stealthy movements, she withdrew from his arms, gathered her clothes, and left the room, unaware that he watched her from beneath lowered lids. Why hadn't she said goodbye? She seemed happy last night. Disappointed, but unwilling to let it wound him, he gave her enough time to get clear of the house, then got up and fixed a cup of coffee. If all their loving had meant to her was a hookup, then he'd leave it at that. Reaper ignored the familiar pain in his leg and opened the door of the old truck. Flint had invited him to come work on his cattle ranch after Reaper had retired. He'd accepted Flint's offer while he figured out what to do with the rest of his life. Following his serious injuries from the IED, Reaper's body had never regained the robust power that he'd always counted on. Though he'd already been considering retirement at the 16-year mark in his SEAL career, that physical loss had been the determining factor for him. But he'd been in the Navy his whole adult life, having joined when he was just 18. All he knew was war. Now he'd have to find a way to make those skills count as a civilian. His phone rang. It was Slade. "Hey, what's up?" "Glad you came Saturday night, bro. It wasn't so bad, was it?" "Tina sure was happy you came," Slade said. Tina had always been sweet to Reaper. It was okay. "So, how did it go with Courtney? You guys seem to really hit it off." Reaper sighed. "All right, I guess." "You guess? Did something go wrong?" He wasn't up to a talk about his love life. "She thought I was still asleep and just left. I don't get it. But I'm also not going to worry about it." "Really?" "Uh-huh." Talking about it made him realize that he was pretty disappointed. "Honestly," Slade said, "she dates, but we don't usually see her with the same guy more than once or twice. Maybe that's all it is." "Maybe." Reaper quickly ended the call. It had been a long, hard day, and it was time to head home. Back at the ranch's hunter's cabin where he was staying, he headed in to shower. Sweaty from a day of feeding cattle, fence mending, or doctoring sick or injured animals, it was always the first thing he did when he came inside. He'd never realized that fixing fence was a constant chore on a ranch. Sagging or downed wire was an everyday find. not to mention broken posts and stays on the older fences on the place. With over 17,000 acres and more than 25 herds of Santa Gertrudis cattle on the ranch, mending fences and clearing fence lines were a big part of his day. He stepped under the steaming spray, letting it pound his shoulders. His head sagged, and the water rolled down his face, taking with it the dirt from the dusty wind that blew across the dry South Texas landscape. He breathed deeply through his mouth, the heat from the downpour seeping into his muscles. His mind dulled, his defenses lowered, and suddenly memories flooded him. The loss of his baby boy 5 years ago hit his unprotected heart. He heaved a heavy sigh. Along with the memory of his 3-month-old son Grayson, always came the agony of his wife's suicide. He should have been there for her, should have known the depth of her despair. He'd buried himself in his SEAL career instead, his own way of coping with the unbearable pain of their loss. As one deployment followed another, his wife Lisa had been left alone to cope with her grief. Though 4 years had gone by, her passing seemed like yesterday. He would never forgive himself. He scrubbed his hand over his face in an unconscious attempt to rid himself of the agonizing memories. He was facing another night alone. He should be used to it by now. He desperately wanted to be. His familiar mental defenses rose, and the agony receded. The steel-nerved Navy SEAL poured shampoo into his hand and began to wash his hair.
Monday evening, Courtney revved the engine of her small SUV, then headed out of the school parking lot. As the lead third-grade teacher and someone the other teachers looked up to at Blackbrush Elementary, she'd volunteered to chair the committee for the teacher's skit that would be one of the highlights of the annual fall festival. Being a committee chair was nothing new to her, however. Staying busy was a priority in her life. She'd found long ago that a hectic schedule kept sadness at bay, and between her evening activities at the school, her painting, the occasional hike, and getting her lesson plans done, there was little time for grief. She could cross one more night off. Making sure that she had something to do when she wasn't at work was a critical part of her life plan. It was her way of coping with a loss that she refused to let overwhelm her. This strategy had been successful for nearly 10 years. At 33, most of her friends were married with children, so getting together wasn't as easy as it used to be. She'd become comfortable going to the movies and out to dinner by herself. She did date, though, quite a bit, but she didn't plan to marry again. She pulled into her driveway and stared out the windshield for a moment. How she loved her old house with its elegant trim, old-fashioned wraparound wooden porch, and decorative hardwood door. The big glass windows were her favorite feature, and the lace curtains she'd hung at them made intricate shadows in the morning sun each day. She kicked off her shoes at the front door and heaved a sigh of relief. Staying so busy gave her no time to rest. And her insomnia didn't help either. Years ago, Dr. Evans had prescribed her sleeping pills, thank goodness, and they were effective on most nights. Arching back as far as she could go, she stretched her tired muscles. The dance skit had taken a lot of energy to go through time after time this afternoon. But it would be really cute if she did say so herself. She headed into the shower, wondering what the heck she was going to fix for supper. A short time later, head swathed in a towel, she examined the meager contents of her fridge. Damn, it was a bummer to fix food for just one person, but leftovers were a total drag. She opened the crisper drawers. Looked like it was going to be a salad again tonight. As she sat at the table with her dinner, her mind wandered to the handsome ex-SEAL she'd met. She expected him to be broody and hard to talk to, but that really hadn't been the case. True, he wasn't much of a conversationalist, but they'd gotten along just fine. and he'd been a good dancer. Warmth spread through her as she remembered his tender lovemaking. Then she steeled herself and took a long swallow of iced tea, letting her mind return to her long-ago pain. Setting all thoughts of Austin O'Brien aside, she finished her salad. Chapter 2. Courtney looked at Tina over her sandwich in the teacher's lounge on Tuesday. "I don't kiss and tell." Tina laughed. "Come on! Don't keep me in the dark. What happened?" Courtney rolled her eyes. "Austin was sweet. He even asked if it would bother me if you all saw us leave together. I told him I could never keep a secret from you anyway." "You got that right, sister." Tina grinned and took a bite of her casserole. "So, are you going to see him again?" Courtney raised her brows. "Think who you're talking to. Of course not." "I swear, Courtney, you've got to get over this thing you have about seeing someone more than once or twice. I mean, I know what happened to you way back when, and it was horrible. But there are so many nice men in the world." Courtney took another bite of sandwich. "Not happening. I'm fine the way I am. I'm happy. I keep busy." "Boy, you can say that again. I get tired just watching you." Courtney paused and met her friend's gaze. "I'll admit he's a good dancer." Tina grinned. "Well, that's all that counts." Courtney laughed. "We both know that's a prerequisite if I'm going to date him." "Come on, then. Give him another shot." But trusting a man with her emotions wasn't possible. All it took was remembering the pain it had once caused her, and she had all the reason she needed to keep her distance. Courtney shook her head. "Nah, we had a wonderful night. I'll leave it at that." "So did you at least tell him that you enjoyed yourself?" A pang of guilt shot through her. "Not exactly. I kinda snuck out without saying goodbye." Tina threw her head back and groaned. "Oh my God! I can't believe you did that. What are you gonna say the next time you see him?" Courtney's throat tightened. "I'm hoping I don't see him again. Won't he be leaving when he figures out what he wants to do?" Tina blew out a breath. "Yeah, but who knows when that will be? Damn, girl, you're a mess." Courtney wrapped the remains of her sandwich in her napkin. "Tell me about it." It wasn't as easy as she claimed to keep the handsome sailor out of her thoughts. Austin had been so gentle, and memories of their loving came to her throughout the afternoon. However, all thoughts of that night fled as she stood at a student's desk shortly before the end of the day. Ryan, a little boy who often came to school smelling unwashed and with his homework undone, raised his shirt sleeve to scratch his arm, revealing purple fingerprints. "Ryan, will you please come with me?" Courtney led him out into the hall and knelt down in front of him. "Ryan, I noticed that you have some marks on your arm right here." She touched the spot. "Can you tell me what happened?" The boy looked down at the floor and shrugged. "It looks like someone grabbed you. Is that right?" He nodded. "Can you tell me who did it?" After a few seconds, he said,
"Nobody likes a tattletale."
"Did this happen on the playground?" He shrugged again. She sighed. "Ryan, if you're getting bullied, I'll make it stop. You know you can always tell me if someone hurts you. I'm here to help, okay?" He nodded again. She patted his shoulder. "Okay, let's go back to class." Shaken by the incident, after getting all her students on their buses, Courtney poked her head into the school counselor's office.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?